Hey guys, welcome back to the Theory Lesson Series. In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to construct a major scale, and of course we're going to do that on the guitar. There's a little bit of background information that we need to know. So a major scale is just a series of whole steps and half steps. Whole steps and half steps, as a review, are intervals. A whole step is 2 frets on the guitar. A half step is 1 fret. So this is an important thing to remember. My students, when they're first learning this stuff, tend to get a little confused. They'll try to assign the whole steps and half steps to specific notes. They're the intervals in between. It's the distance from one note to the next, right? So we're either moving 2 frets or 1 fret or a whole step or a half step from the note that we were on, moving forward in the scale or backwards in the scale. So the major scale pattern is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, which is not the easiest thing to rattle off real quick. So the way I like to think of it is 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step, 2 wholes and a half, 3 wholes and a half. And whatever way you use to remember that, to be able to retain that information quickly, is super important. But I think in the end, that's just a learning tool, and you will make use of that information, but not the same way as when you're initially learning it or absorbing it. So one thing we'll say about major scales: you will never have flats and sharps existing in one scale. It's only going to be sharps or only going to be flats, or if it's C major, no sharps, no flats. You will never consecutively repeat a note, so there will not be 2 types of E's in a row or 2 types of A's in a row. And you'll never skip a letter. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in a second. So let's start with, we're just going to do this from the open string, a couple open strings. So we'll do that from the G string first. So string 3, open G. All right. We're going to just use 1 finger so we don't get confused about how we're shifting along the neck. G is our root, so we're going to go from G to G through the pattern of a major scale. And then we'll play that a little bit quicker so we can actually hear the sound of the major scale. So G is our first note. We move up a whole step. We're going to stay, every single note is on the 3rd string here. Move up a whole step or 2 frets to the 2nd fret, which is going to be A. That's the 2nd note in the scale. Then we move up a whole step to B. Then we move up a half step to C. That's whole step, half step. And then we're going to have 3 wholes and a half. So move up a whole step from C to D, move up a whole step from D to E, move up a whole step from E to F sharp, and then a half step from F sharp to G. So just to recap that, I'll do this in a few different ways. Open, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12 are the frets, but that's not near as important as knowing the notes and how you constructed that major scale. So scale degree numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Scale, notes: G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And then going back down a half step, down a whole step, down a whole step, down a whole step, down a half step, down a whole step, and then down a whole step. So now let's do that on the 5th string, open A. And we'll construct a major scale starting on A, and then we'll do one that's all fretted. We'll just pick a random location. But we're also going to talk about why sharps and flats don't appear in the same scale. Or how to avoid that, I guess, because it can be a little tricky when you're initially learning it. So we're starting on A, open A, string 5, and then we go to fret 2, or B, up a whole step. Then up a whole step to C sharp, up a half step, D, up a whole step, E, up a whole step, F sharp, up a whole step, G sharp, up a half step, A. So 2 holes and a half, 3 holes and a half, or 2 jumps of 2 frets and 1 jump of 1 fret, and then 3 jumps of 2 frets and 1 jump of 1 fret. So here we go from A to B, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So you might be wondering how do you know whether to call something by a flat name or a sharp name? Well, it goes back to those rules that we discussed in the beginning of the video. So let's take this C sharp, for instance. That can also be called D flat. D flat and C sharp are the same note. But let's see what happens if we call that D flat instead of C sharp. So we have open A, B, D flat, and D. So what happens is we don't have any type of C note, A, B, D flat. We went from B to D flat, and then to D. So we have 2 types of Ds, and then no C anywhere in the scale. So that's why, that's how you know whether you're constructing it incorrectly or not. If you have a note that's being skipped, if you have sharps and flats mixed, or if you have a note that's being repeated. All right, so let's take a flat scale just for good measure. So we'll do the same thing on the 5th string. We'll start on the 1st fret, which could be A sharp or B flat, but there is no A sharp scale, A sharp major scale. There is a B flat major scale. We'll learn all that information later on, but if we were to use A sharp, then we'll run into double sharps, and it gets a little messy. So B flat major. Move up a whole step to C. Move up a whole step to D. Move up a half step. That could be D sharp, but in the context of B flat major, it is not. It is E flat. Right? So we don't have D, D sharp, and we're not mixing flats and sharps. Right? It's all for the consistency of staying in a key and being able to see that on sheet music as you're reading. Also, you wouldn't want, it's going to be a less favorable situation if you're having to jump back and forth between sharps and flats. It just becomes a mess. So, B flat, up a whole step to C, up a whole step to D, up a half step to E flat, 2 holes and a half, up a whole step to F, up a whole step to G, up a whole step to A, and a half step to B flat. B flat, A, G, F, E flat, D, C, B flat. You can apply that anywhere on the neck just to get comfortable with that whole step, half step pattern. And then what we're going to be moving on to is looking at the major scale patterns, starting on different fingers in different positions on the neck, dealing with the complication of the B string, which shifts notes forward, but it's really not that big of a deal. So you can't really see that whole step, half step pattern when you start crossing strings unless you know your pitches, which is something that you can get out of playing scales, and we're going to go through all that in the upcoming videos. So I challenge you guys to just think about if you're already comfortable with your notes, just pick random spots to start and create a major scale. Try and call the notes out loud, call the scale degrees out loud. If you're not comfortable with the notes on the fretboard, then determine what one note is and then try to work from there. Just build it little by little. Anyways, let me know if you have any questions about that, and we'll see you in the next theory video. Thanks a lot.